Oh, there's our, all right. So we have a few guests with with us tonight. So we got Nicci Obert, who's our research director. Want to say hi, Nicci, before we get going? Adam, I know I'm not going to put you on the spot. I tell him about the plumbing incident.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nicci. I'm the research director here with the program, and really excited to meet you guys. And you'll probably encounter me more later in the program, but yeah, excited to be here and meet you.
Yeah, we'll come back. Thank you, Nicci. We'll come back to Nicci a little bit later when we talk about the student research projects, and that's her jurisdiction, I guess you would say. And like I said, Adam Cowart is here as well. And you're going to meet him in intro
I'll just
class.
say hi. It's nice and quiet right now, so I can speak up. Yeah, it's great to meet you all. Just briefly about myself, I've taught the program since 2019. Alternative perspectives. I've taught alternative perspectives a couple times, design futures research, advanced strategy and planning. And this semester, I have the privilege of teaching Intro to Foresight. And so I think a good chunk of you will probably be in that class. So it's great to virtually meet everybody.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started because we got plenty of stuff. And so I will try to remember to count to 5 and pause so that you can ask questions. And then the other plan is to leave hopefully about 15 minutes for questions at the end. So obviously, as an orientation, the whole idea is to address your concerns. So, well, I suppose I should introduce myself, right? So I'm Andy Hines, and I am what we call the program coordinator, which means I kind of do everything, a little bit of everything. Janitorial duties, you name it, moving furniture, I'm your man, and so on. But basically, I am teaching the futures research class, and I saw a few brave souls who are stepping right in. Good for you. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump in. And I'll just go through some we do this every semester, so we've got a pretty good idea of like what's the useful kind of information to pass on at the beginning. I have a little bit of like preaching. This is the preaching part. It'll be short, but I have to do it. We do have a definition of foresight. You don't have to agree to it, but we like to at least start on the same page, right? And it seems to work well with clients. So you'll find, and it starts right in the intro class, that we're always thinking about how do we, if you will, explain ourselves to others. So we try to give you a lot of help in that regard because you get, you get the same questions. Like even now, you're getting a degree in what? Right? And so having an answer for that, right? Or just having at least a starter answer. So again, here's our starter answer, and I'm sure you were able to assimilate that. So let's go on to a little bit deeper about like, just kind of infusing right from the get-go what we're trying to do, right? So first of all, thank you for coming, right? I mean, this is important work. I truly believe it. I hope you do too. The world needs us. They need more of us. So, we have a purpose. We have a mission. We need this, and the world needs us. So you could argue more than ever, but we'll save that for another day. So we're, in as you know, I think as you talk to me, hopefully in the process, you know that we're very much about applied. How do you do the work? How do you practice this stuff? And of course, we sprinkle in the sort of appropriate amount of theory. And you'll notice in the various things we do certificate courses, we have a community lab, we have our research projects, the whole down at the bottom, the vision is this kind of idea of being a hub, kind of an academic hub, since we are a university, for foresight thinking, foresight education. So you're in the hub, you're in the nerve center. And we just celebrated our 50th anniversary. So we're the first university program to make it to 50. Let's hope we're not the only one, but so far we're first, right? Okay. A few things about beliefs. And we like to just say that, just kind of reinforce some key messages, right? One thing that, we totally believe, you do this work, you will definitely not be surprised. You will be ahead of the future. And one of the benefits I would just personally say, having hung around for 35 years in the field now, I've seen it enough to say, all right, we do this work, it works. Now, the hard part is not necessarily doing the work, but getting it acted upon. We'll talk a lot about that in the curriculum, right? So change is actually slower than we think, and it's because we study the change, we catch it early, we're usually ahead of it. Okay, then what else do we want to say here is, all right, obviously it's a lens for understanding the world, it's a developmental discipline. So those are some of the key things. Lifelong learning is actually, which we mentioned in the third bullet there, is one of the pillars of our next, our current, I guess, strategic plan. So we're really trying to work on that. Once you get in, we ain't letting you out. It's a lifetime deal. All right. So you'll see the approach again, practical application, real projects with real clients, and we will talk about that a little bit later. And then the second one, because you get asked, like, what should you be able to do? What do I hope you can do when you leave here, right? That you could go into a conversation with a potential client and kind of assess their foresight, futures-oriented needs. You could help them identify those needs. You could design a project. You could lay out a project and then lead the client through that project, right? And help them, if you will, achieve useful results. So we really expect at the end you can do it yourself. Now you might need a little help in the first couple, right? But we think you can do it, and we think it can be done. So we want you to be ready to get out there and start doing stuff. Let's see. All right, the history, a little bit of history. Just where do we come from? I mentioned we're at we just had our 50th anniversary last spring. Obviously that means we started way back in the 70s. So back in the 2000s, we started introducing online classes, like one at a time, or hybrids actually, physical plus virtual. We moved over to the main campus back 2007. And then I think it's probably, I should note, in 2019, we moved to a fully virtual model. So we've been doing that for 6 years now. So I think we got it. We feel like we got it down pretty good. And we didn't know the pandemic was coming, although some might have suspected we did. But when it happened, we didn't have to change a thing. What else? So I guess the other things you'll see in there that we introduced the boot camps and the client research, somewhere in the middle of that. Okay. And then I guess in terms of our enrollment, it is in the pandemic. Now, one of the things that is kind of the paradoxes of our futures work maybe is that disaster is good for business. When people get surprised by something, they go, "What? See that?" And they, kind of knock on our door and go, "Help us." So we during the pandemic, our enrollment, and plus I guess there's nothing else to do, maybe, right? So our enrollment went up pretty substantially. That particular the year of 2021 to 2022 in particular was a record. Okay. One last kind of next to last wind up, I guess. So we like to call the field foresight, but there's not a good agreement on this. Just so you know, you'll hear different things. And right from the get-go, I'll let you know that we all recognize that we teach a way to do the future here. University of Houston does it, but we totally honor, respect, and want there to be other ways to do this work. And we will point it out where it's, where we can. So we're not saying our way is right or our way is better. We're just saying it's our way. And therefore there are other schools of thought, and make your own decisions accordingly. So we call it foresight. Other people might say future studies. That's fine. We don't like futurism though. So for the reason I mentioned there. But that's popping up a lot. If you do a search right now, futurism is alive and well. So it's not like we can dictate the terms here. All right. That's the kind of the backdrop. Let's get to the nuts and bolts of it. So number one, this is the stuff that we always hate, but you got to do it, right? Please use your UH email for all UH communications. So, They're really getting strict on that. I just want to say, like, it'll save you a lot of trouble if you start off with that, because there is a lot of communications that only goes out to your UH email, and if you don't have it at least forwarded, just do a forwarding, but do it soon, right? Okay. All right, make sure, because if it goes into that black hole, you say, hey, they didn't tell me I needed to apply to graduate, and then you don't graduate till, for another semester, that kind of stuff. And then Donella Dillon. Donella is wonderful. We love Donella. She helps us a lot with all of our various problems. She has this thing, though, you must use your student. You must, whenever you communicate with her, include they call it your PeopleSoft ID number. It's that 7 digits. So maybe make a note of that somewhere just so you can access it. That way, I guess they can look you up really fast, get your records in order. So, all right. And Danella is not necessarily like, so when you're asking about which courses should I take, she can tell you what's available, but she doesn't know, like, that's not her job. That's my job primarily to say, all right, in this fall, I think you should take this and this. Like those kinds of questions about the curriculum are me. Danella handles things like, how many classes do I have left, and how many electives, and like she keeps track of the overall records. I need to take a semester off. That's her. Like that stuff like that, but I'm like specific advice about the curriculum. All right. And then one more, this is a tricky one because right now we have about half the students take what we'll call regular and half the students are on what we call UH Extend. And when you sign up for classes, there's 2 sections and you have to just make sure you pick the right section. So you might suspect, and it's usually true, that if you sign up for a section and it barks at you, it probably means you signed up for the wrong one. Try the other one. Right. So if you're like, and what we do know for sure, it's really, there's some quirks like there is with any system. The 40 section is almost always UH Extend. So if you see a 40 in the section, that's the UH Extend one. And then the regular one, you should see a 20. So sorry, that's the best advice I can give you there. So usually, like I say, if you sign up for the wrong section, you usually get an error message, you go fix it. All right, so that's the 20 and the 40. All right, let me pause there because that's some of the basic stuff. Want to make sure, see if anyone has any questions about that before we go further. Good. Okay, I counted to 5. All right, excellent, excellent. I did notice that a whole bunch of you are in Canvas already, so that's wonderful. And that is the next slide is Canvas. The funny, I don't know if it's funny or ironic story is for years we were using Canvas stealthily. We weren't supposed to when Blackboard was the official learning platform. We got caught and we got ordered off of Canvas and ordered onto Blackboard about 3 or 4 years ago. And then the university switched to Canvas, so now we're back. What are you going to do? But we like that because Canvas is a lot more friendlier, I guess a lot friendlier than Blackboard was. So anyway, I looked in pretty much now there may be a few folks who are on the call here who are not like all the way through the you call it the admission process yet. So don't panic if you don't see yourself in Canvas yet. But if you think you've gone through everything and you were able to sign up for a class, you should it sometimes takes like 24 to 48 hours between signing up for a class and showing up in Canvas. So there might be a little lag there. That's number one. Number two is like if you haven't got in yet, now there's still time. And unfortunately we do this every semester, even though you'd think we'd learn, right? But there's only so many things one can control. So I know there's a handful of you that are just about like I approved a couple people today, as a matter of fact. So, okay, hang in there. We'll get you in at the last second. All right. So if you're not in yet, but no, let's keep on it, right? Keep on it. But you right now I just looked. They just started putting people in Canvas a couple days ago. Okay. All right. So you'll see like this portal thing that you use, we call it the Access UH or the My UH. Like that's kind of that's the home base that you can find almost anything from. So working through that portal is now like your essential home base. Okay, one thing I wanted to mention here. So in regular, we do what do you call it? We have virtual classes every night, right? 5:30 to 8:30, well, Monday through Thursday, depending on which class you're in. We record them. We do not require class attendance. So you can do it all asynchronously if you want, using the recordings. There are some, depending on the class, there are some group project requirements. Not too many. We try to be what do you call it? Easy about that, right? Because we know most people it's a pain in the neck, right? But if there are, you just got to figure that out, right? So if you're on a group if you're in a class that has a group project, you communicate asynchronously and say, all right, here's my chunk of the assignment. I'll turn it in on Friday, and like you coordinate and get it done. So you can asynchronously get everything done. Some people do totally asynchronously. Not too many, but a few. Okay. But the Zumas, and obviously it's nice if you can make the virtual class, you get a little bit more, one might argue, out of the experience. Okay, so that's Canvas. Let's do this next one. Because now when you get into your first class next week, is it next week? Oh my God. Typically the instructors will take you through like a basic orientation to the class. So you'll get through, here is Canvas, here's where stuff is. So we'll go through all that, those kind of details. But so this is a little bit higher level. All right, degree plan. So this is one thing to keep in mind. You need 10 classes to graduate. Unless you're grading the grad certificate, then you have 4 classes. And you can see that there are some that are required. You have 2 electives, and then there's a master's option. Okay, so that's the master. So you should have that from Donella, or you should be able to find that, or we can get that in your hands because you need to have, just to keep track. Obviously, all of you are going to take intro, and then you might decide how many extra you might take this fall. So before I show you the schedule, just keep that in mind, right? That you have 2 electives, and you have the master's option, you have a choice of 3 things, and then everything else is required. Okay. All right. Now you have the question about like how much time. So if you budget about 10 hours a week total, including class time, you should be okay. All right. So I know we have a few people like taking 3 classes, like, oh, you almost get yourself a full-time job. Good luck to you. It's hard. Look, if you're working full-time and doing full-time, I mean, God bless you, but that's really, really hard, really hard. But it's been done. Usually people that take 3 classes are not working. I'll just tell you that, just so you know. And yeah, it's a lot. And again, I don't think it's necessarily that the material is difficult, but there's just a lot. There's a lot to do, and it's hard to keep it all straight. Okay, enough of that. So here's our typical schedule. Once in a while it changes. Now we had this weird thing come up this fall where we actually have 75 students, but nobody needed an elective. We have a summer elective, and this summer's elective was very popular. It had like 28 students in it, which is much more than typical for summer elective. So it's basically like everybody took their summer elective. They didn't need a fall elective, so we didn't have alternative perspectives. But you see, those are the 4 classes so next fall, those 4 or 5 classes will be there. And then the same thing this coming spring, the order will also be this. The offerings will be the same in spring 2027 as well. So we try to keep that consistent to help your planning. Okay. The elective every summer is different. And so then we'll talk about the projects and the master's option in a second. You can kind of do that whenever it pops up. There's a couple of places where we might think about order. I'll mention it here. You might not remember, but I kind of like it's better to take advanced strategies after the other courses in the fall. So take that one last. because especially after futures research, because it just kind of builds on futures research. It's not impossible to do it at the same time, but it's not as good. Same thing in the spring, we have one pro seminar is intended to kind of be like your last class or your last semester. So if possible, try to take that at the end. If there's a circumstance where it doesn't make sense, we work it out, and you know, it can be worked out, but that's just a little bit of advice. Okay, so before I describe the master's option, does the schedule and the courses make sense? The amount of time, you kind of know what you want to take? Sweet. Okay, let's go. So the master's option, now here's the trickiest part of this, is not too many people write a thesis, right? Because the typical reason for write a thesis is to go on to get a doctorate. There's very few doctorates in the foresight space, but you can do it. So just don't pretend you can do it, but most people don't bother. The thing about this thesis is it costs you one elective because it's a 6 credit, right? So if you take the thesis option, you can only do one elective, then you got to use your other one to do thesis prep, and then, you know, the thesis writing. And it's just a more formal academic process. Whereas the master's project is very loosey-goosey in the sense that you can do almost anything with that, as long as we agree, you and I. Most commonly, people use their master's project as working on a client project, but you may do an individual one as well. You might do something at your workplace. You might do something as a volunteer. There's all kinds of different ways you can do the master's project. What we say is, now for the thesis, it has to be at the end, because that's just the university. The project is typically near the end, but sometimes if there's a good project in the middle, and you're like, "Ooh, that's the one," we'll allow that. Like we'll do that. So, of course, you know, our goal is to provide a good experience. So if it pops up, sometimes we just take it when it comes. I would say about the project, and Nicci might say a little bit more about this later, but just in case so we don't forget, is we usually want people to at least have gone through either futures research or world futures first, so that you've been through the methodology. That way, when you go on a client project, you actually know our methodology. So it wouldn't be in your first semester. It's usually about halfway through is when we usually start asking people to be on projects. Sometimes earlier, but anyway, all right. Then internships, we don't get that many requests anymore. We used to get more requests, but we don't get so many. So usually we have to arrange it. And then if you know you want to do an internship, we got to talk early and then, you know, kind of work it beforehand. So I'd really like to work for Institute for the Future, whatever it might be. We need probably a semester to strategize and approach them. So it's funny how like we're getting a lot more project work, fewer internships, and 10 years ago it was the other way around. It was more internships, less projects. I don't know. And then last thing I wanted to mention, the independent study. You can, if you say like, I really want to do, you know, a deep dive on, you know, we use the topic of the day, AI, right? You want to do a deep dive on AI and something, you can use the independent study to, you know, we just basically arrange it and then you go do it. Okay.
Andy, I'll just add to going back to the thesis piece, because usually there's a couple people every semester who are getting to the end, and a couple people, you know, we get a lot of lifelong learners in the program. So there's always a couple people that are at least giving the side eye to a doctorate. Um, and so they're like, oh, what should I do? And my own experience is that because I went through the program, I decided to go ahead with the projects and the internship stuff because I was like, I didn't want to, you know, waste credit on the on the thesis. And when it came time to go do a doctorate and to apply, it ended up not being a barrier at all. Like I was concerned about it up front because I'd taken a couple of years off between doing the master's and the PhD. But it turned out to be like a huge non-issue. Like nobody that I came across in the various programs were concerned about that. It was like you need to be able to show writing, you need to be able to show research discipline, you need to show all sorts of stuff. But like you know, like a formal thesis was not a requirement. So if you are one of those side eye people, you have a specific program in mind, check the guidelines and see if they're like, or talk to someone there, right? But my experience is that the thesis it's almost like a bit of like a urban legend or myth based off my experience. So I'll just throw that in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I can kind of verify that from because I serve on a lot of doctoral committees. So yeah, we never asked, did you do a thesis, right? I mean, we don't even ask that question, but you can kind of tell, right? So if you have a good maybe um, but we would say that you can use your master's project to kind of do the same thing that you could accomplish with a thesis, but it's a little bit easier to work it through the project angle. All right, let's move on. So the electives, like I said, we we call it goofing around. We have fun with the electives. So we did something called Activating the Future last summer. Big hit, I guess. Very popular, where we tried to pull together all the lessons, like how do you actually get this through the system, right? How do you get foresight work implemented? So that was a lot of fun. And then we just kind of, I believe actually we're thinking about maybe to do something around AI this summer, just so we can we can put our point of view around what's happening in that space. And we just do different things. So that's something. If summer is a nice way to pick up an extra class if you're a busy schedule, and they're also compressed, right? So there's 7 weeks instead of 15, which is kind of nice. Okay. So what's the advice before we move into some more of the program stuff? It's just this idea of being like a sponge, right? Like, and don't be super worried about like the job or the what I'm going to do. Maybe about halfway is when you start worrying, but for the beginning, especially in the first semester, just soak it in. Because what we find is as people come through, like you don't, maybe you already have a firm goal, and that's cool too. But a lot of people, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this, and just kind of like try out some different stuff in the program, and then at some point you go, aha, right? You'll find a certain group or a certain type of work, or a certain tool, and then you'll find your passion. So kind of take that initial idea of just seeing, right? Like, what am I, you run into people who do keynoting for a living. You go, oh, that's me. So just kind of take it in and learn. Then, of course, you might meet somebody at a spring gathering, and that will be where you find that passion. So I mentioned we just had one, our 50th in the spring, but every spring we do a different topic. We actually have our dates for April 10th and 11th. We'll put out a save the date soon, and we do different things, and we bring together the alums, the current students, and maybe a few prospects as well. So that'll be something that's we have at least one thing we do face to face. So that's our, if you will, our one face to face currently. Okay. Now let's move on to who we are. You're going to see a lot of these folks this fall, right? Well, you might see them virtually at least. We have our faculty on the left here, and of course you see Adam who's with us, and then you see Nicci on the part of the staff. And then April, Corey, you'll be hearing from April a lot. She runs our certificate program, but she also does other things as well. And then we have an advisory board. We are going through, as I mentioned earlier, we're going through a strategic planning process, if you will, designing the next iteration. We said the next 50 years, right? We got the first 50 under our belt, so now it's time to think about the next 50. We have a lab. We call it the activation lab, and it's kind of like the hub that we eventually hope will be kind of the home base for our lifelong learning offerings that we are in the process of developing. You'll see there's a link in the upper right to join. So as new students, you can obviously join the community and put you in there. And we didn't really do much this summer because it's the summer. But in the fall, we'll be offering we'll do some like community events, maybe even a community workshop, and then we have some project work that we're brewing that we hope to introduce this fall. So that's one place to connect, right? It's a great place to connect. We also host our projects there too. So that's the Foresight Activation Lab. And then I'm gonna turn this slide over and ask if Nicci, as the Director of Research, could give you a little overview about the various kinds of student projects that we do. Go ahead, Nicci.
Yeah, so like I said, really nice to meet you guys. So the research projects look like this. So you'll be introduced to the idea of the Houston way of doing things, which we call framework foresight in intro, and then you will go through an entire project as an individual in futures research and in world research. So by the time you get to me, by the time you come to a project, you'll have like some experience under your belt. And then what we do is when clients come to us and say, hey, we'd really like to explore the future of water or the future of the Arctic, can you help us? We say, sure. And we form a team of about 4 to 5 students, usually 1 to 2 alumni, and then Andy and I will always be on the projects. Andy and I usually interface with the client, and then we also meet once a week with the team. We go through exactly the same process that you go through as an individual for your individual projects. Yeah, and so on what I'm interested in doing as I'm kind of developing the research branch just a little bit is getting to know you guys before you come to me, just so that we can kind of start to try to match people with projects that are like up their alley. But even when you're on a project that's not exactly what you want, the kind of futures you want to do, it's great experience. It's really like it's fun to work on the teams. Everybody seems to like bouncing ideas off of each other. We have one futurist colleague, alum, who says you should never future alone, which I think is kind of beautiful. Like you just bounce ideas off of each other and it makes you think about the future differently and or about futures differently. So it's a really neat option. And so I highly recommend it. Maybe I'm biased, but I think that the projects are really great. What else? Yeah, one of the big things is like I would love for you guys to introduce yourselves on the Activation Lab app, just because that helps me start to get to know you a little bit and like post like, hey, I saw this cool article or something, and I'd be like, oh, he's interested in X or she's interested in Y. And then I can just kind of keep that in my brain, which helps me when we're starting to form teams, just because I don't get to interact with you guys as much as the professors do. What else? I think
Well, Nicci, while you're thinking there, I would add that that's such a good point, because like a lot of times what happens, especially when we're busy, like Adam and Nicci and I might huddle together and go, all right, who are we going to put on the Pepsi project? And it's like, it's kind of like who you can remember. Now we can go through the list, but like if you're in the lab and you got a profile and you've said, I really like these topics and here's some of the things I've done, we can kind of look at that and go, oh, boom, we got it. So I think that's a really, if you're really interested in that, in that project space, like just letting us know who you are, what you do is like super duper helpful.
and beyond just like letting me know who you are, like that I think that space is like a safe space for you guys to kind of start exploring things. Like I remember when I was a student that like the APF, the Association for Professional Futurists, has like lets you join as a student for inexpensively. So I remember joining that, and there was a bulletin board, or I don't know, whatever function they had, but it's a little intimidating to post there. But if you post on ours, like it's just us, like it's us and the certificate people and the alumni. And so it's just like a nice, safe place to kind of explore your thinking. And people are very kind, and our community is really great. So highly recommend just putting yourself out there, and people will respond, I promise, positively. But that's my second plug. The big thing is projects are great. Join me in a couple of years.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll just pile on that too. Certainly my experience is that the projects are just this like nice happy medium between doing student work and doing real world work, if you will. Like a number of people will probably use actual stuff from their organization in maybe some of their individual projects, but just scaling up, kind of futuring in the wild a little bit more And so it's right, it's real world, it's the client, but you've still got a little bit of, extra backup and support from Andy, Nicci, and, typically some additional alumni and or other faculty. So it's sort of like, I don't want to say you still have the water wings on, but it's just that little extra support, but it's like a real world project. So it's a sort of a nice intermediary step.
Well, thank you. So along the lines of the project, like I mentioned, we used to get more internships, but I don't know. I guess organizations have made different choices. They're still out there, right? So if we do see one, we post them, and that we put that actually in the community in the lab. We'll post them. But a lot of times, again, we negotiate these and just we because we're well connected in the field. Most people know who we are. So we can usually say, hey, we got to, do you need any interns in the upcoming semester, upcoming year? And sometimes that will work. Not always, but sometimes. And you can see some of the ones that we got recently. Okay, and then we run the boot camp. Actually, we can see we were here. We just finished one Friday. And so I took the picture for Adam, and Adam took the picture for me. It's the same people, but anyway. And what's kind of cool about that is, like Nicci mentioned, the lab community does pull in. So the people who come through the boot camp, obviously they're at a different level. So, and some people go from the boot camp and come into the program, but it gives us it's enabled us to become pretty well known around the globe. It's a very international, like as is the master's program. And most people, when you say Houston in the Foresight world, they know who we are and what we're doing and all that. So we're pretty well spread out. And the other part is we have a lot of connections across the planet. And I told them they got to hire our graduates or else they don't get their certificates. No, I did not say that. Okay. Some of the companies that our people are working at. So I would say, obviously, each new cohort is different, but most of the time, folks are already working in an organization, and we say trying to bring the future to it, and or maybe a equally large segment of that is being asked to do it. Like, hey, we want to do futures thinking, and then you're the champion for that. So that's probably a good chunk of our folks like that. And then there's another chunk who I think would just say, I want to reinvent myself in my career, and that's certainly something we can help you with. And then there's maybe a smaller chunk, and I was one of them. So I went through the program in my mid-20s after undergraduate, and I wanted to be a futurist when I grew up. So, like I said, I've never had a real job, or at least not for a long time. So I've been a futurist the whole way through. So some folks are like that. And so one of the reasons that we do the projects is various, but showing folks tangible evidence that you worked on a project, and I would say the same thing right from the get-go. Like any project you do in class, you do it at a high quality. You might even brush it up, polish it up afterwards, because someday when you're down the road, when you're asked, like, well, show me, what does a Foresight project look like? You have some work samples, right? And to varying degrees of reality. But even a really good class project helps. And I said, it's somebody who's used to hire in the quote in the real world. It was always great to see that somebody had actually done the work and you could actually look at it, and it really does make a difference. So right from the get-go, keep your stuff. Think of yourself as an artist with a portfolio. You're a futurist with a portfolio, and be ready. And so, of course, along those lines, I mentioned we're pretty well known. We're writing books and all kinds of things about the future, and a lot of people. So we'll talk about framework foresight a lot, and I might as well say it now. Again, I'm just repeating. We don't believe it's the only way, the right way. It's a useful way, and we've thought a lot about how do you teach the future, because we teach it to a lot of different folks, and so we found this basic idea of having a core process and understanding how to design a core process or a core project, and then adding around that, right? Adding extras on top of that is a useful way to teach the future. So I think that's probably enough out of us. You recognize who we are. So I'm going to just stop sharing and kind of open the floor to y'all and say, what kind of questions are you bringing to the party? Go ahead, Angel.
I was wondering about the master's options, the thesis and the project and the internship. Was there, is it a fourth option that was called a independent, independent studies? Is that a, or is that separate?
Sure. So there was a fourth. So basically, there are the three options. The independent study is really primarily an elective. So you would use that for, it's called 46398 special problems. But no, that's actually you would use that as one of your two electives. So one of the things that happens every once in a while, somebody, does as an example, someone does a project, does their master's project maybe halfway through. Another project comes up next semester. We're really busy. We go through the folks who need it. Nobody else needs it. And we come back, you say, hey, you want to go again? And then you might use your second project. You could use that that 46398 special problems. You could use it as an elective. So that's kind of why it's elective. So sometimes people will do two projects. It's unusual, but it happens. And it's cool. Depends how busy we are. So I think we last spring the border security project was huge, and we were running like three things at the same time, and we were almost ran out of students. We had so many that we had working. So that's what that is. Good question. Other questions?
I think someone put a question in the chat.
Oh, well, I should probably have the chat open. That might help me, huh? Let's see here. How's my chat? Oh, okay. Some electives appear to have hyperlinks. Yeah, if you go, so we have if you haven't found it already, there's a site called Houston Foresight. We call it our unofficial webpage because we're not really supposed to have it. But we put a lot of our what we think are helpful information that maybe the main university site doesn't have. So like we have recent syllabi and just a lot of like what are the typical kinds of questions people ask. Like we post just last week we posted the winners of our we have two sets of winners. So we have something called the Houston Foresight Awards, which you can submit. Like let's say you do a semester long project, you submit it, and then we judge it, and roughly the top three projects, depending on the numbers depend, but the top three projects will win a prize, and part of the prize is you get to present at the spring gathering. So that's the Houston Awards. And then there's a second set of awards called Nicci mentioned the Association of Professional Futurists. They have a student competition. And the faculty pick we pick three projects that we as a faculty think are really good, and then we submit them into the competition. And which was getting back to what we just got the announcement from APF on the winners. And in our master's program, we had first prize and second prize in individual, and then we also had first prize in the group project. So anyway, and that stuff is posted on Houston Foresight. So a long answer to a simple question. So there is a lot of good stuff there on Houston Foresight, as well as the activation lab. Other questions? All right, while you're thinking, because there's something I was going to mention and I forgot. So if you have it, write it down or put it in the chat or just hold it. Is one of the things. So we don't have like tests. This is not like your typical, I guess, I don't know, I shouldn't say typical undergrad or graduate class, but most of the work we do is either project or project related. So one of the opportunities you have is to pick like what you want to focus on. And I would say students take different strategies there. Sometimes they say like, I'm going to do all my projects on water. I want to become like the water futurist, right? And really specialize in that. And you look at different aspects of the same topic. Other people say, oh, I want to pick different ones, like space and water and whatever, right? So you have that ability to kind of think through, like, how do I want to use you get to pick your projects, right? So you have some flexibility in how you tailor like what particular content areas you want to focus on or diversify. Does that make sense? So you do have some customization in there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, Andy, because we touch on a little bit in intro and then we spend more time on the topic in pro seminar. But just thinking about how you really want to apply foresight, like how do you want to apply it? And so part of that application is, do you want to be more of a, or do you plan on being more of a generalist? So you can kind of hop in and do like a future of water and do a future of the Arctic and do all right? Or are you saying, you have a deep expertise in cybersecurity and that's your focus. So you're going to be a futurist who focuses on the future of cybersecurity. That's your jam. And so that could be one thing that comes into play. Like we touch on that a little bit in intro, but then we sort of try to clarify those intentions before you leave the program in pro seminar. When you're thinking about your projects, that's sort of a helpful, I think, lens to look through as well. Is kind of saying, is there like a theme or a certain topic that I already have experience in that I want to dig deeply into and apply for every project? Or do I just kind of want to flex in different directions and just try out different things, like maybe topics that you've never even thought of before that you really just want to dig into and apply the foresight approach to that. The only other nuance there too that's may or may not be helpful is to what extent, if you're currently employed, your employer is expecting you to generate something within the boundaries of the class that is sort of useful and maybe productive for them. So my own experience having an employer, I just sort of like split the difference a little bit. Like I did like a project that was very much relevant to them, and I ended up also delivering that internally. And then I had another one that I maybe forgot to tell them that I was doing, and I went off in a totally different direction and had some fun and learned some new stuff, right? So those are just some of the considerations around your own projects you might want to think about a little bit.
A great point, Adam. I guess for me, I just I just had fun. I think for the halfway point, and then I went, oh crap, I should probably think about a job. But in the beginning, I was just enjoying it. Um, anyway, okay. Other
But
questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead. We don't have one pending, so go ahead.
okay. Then some of you will be in my class, so you'll get used to this. I might just ramble on a little bit until someone finally puts me out of my misery by asking a question. It's a bit of a pedagogical strategy sometimes. So, another consideration too is just the timing of, say, the electives and the theory courses in relation to maybe when you do some of the projects. So, for example, our theory heavy courses, if you will, I think Andy maybe alluded to it, but so social change and systems, those are very much heavy around more theory related. And the electives, design futures, which just overall emphasis on materializing and bringing the future to life in different shapes and forms, right? And then alternative perspectives, which is really this sort of like massive smorgasbord of all sorts of interesting stuff that we don't have time to cover in the main program, right? So everything from identity-based futures, different value systems, alternative approaches to framework foresight, just a whole bunch of stuff. So certainly one piece that I find is sometimes really helpful for students going through the entire program is they do one project maybe a little bit earlier on, and they're really kind of focusing on like the core approach and just getting that down and getting comfortable with it. And then maybe they take alternative perspectives, and then they get to their second maybe larger project, and then they're able to layer in like, you know, post-structural analysis for foresight into the work. They're able to bring causal layered analysis into the work. They bring integral theory into the work. Like they start layer, you know what I mean? Like you start throwing in some ingredients and making it your own a little bit based off of some other stuff that you're learning beyond the core foresight framework approach. That's one thing, other thing maybe to consider, depending also, you know, how long you're going to be in the program. So like how many cycles or semesters you'll go through it, and be a bit strategic there around maybe how some of these other courses can really kind of feed in and enrich whatever you're working on. See, look, now Brandon has a question. There you go. My strategy worked. You're on mute, my friend.
Can you guys hear me now? I'm on my phone.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess this is three questions. One, has there been any thought to maybe even turning this into a PhD program? Two, from y'all's experience, are there any other comparable, I guess, if there isn't already talks of having a PhD program, but comparable programs, if we want to continue going into it, and get that certification next to our names. And then I guess three, and I think someone already mentioned it in the chat, just where you've seen students, graduates, alumni take this. Obviously, I'm tracking the probably, government, nonprofits, and I guess even the private sector.
Okay, I can start with that. So the PhD, I mean, it's a no-brainer that we want one. We should have one. Probably not going to happen anytime soon, and that's just university politics. And I won't bore you with it. It's frustrating to us, but there it is. So what we do have is an informal arrangement with the university in Australia, University of Sunshine Coast, and they will take the coursework from here, and then you would write a PhD with them. It ain't cheap, but it works. And so there, and other than that, the landscape for PhDs in foresight is pretty thin. Now, I don't know, Adam, I don't know if I would consider Carnegie Mellon, certainly that your route that would be another option, but also maybe an expensive one. I don't know. Do you have any you have any comments about the route you took?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple programs out there. All of them have their pros and cons. I agree it would make sense if we were able to have something. There might be some noise in the background. I apologize. There's some pros and cons to sort of all the programs. I think for me, one of the bigger pieces was how practical versus so applied versus academic you want to be in a PhD, and that was a big point. So for me, I personally ended up doing the PhD in transition design at Carnegie Mellon University. So really sort of heavily foresight influenced. But also they are very much about like real world applications, trying to make something that's going to contribute to larger systemic change in the world, right? Versus something where other academic PhD programs are like, if you dare write anything practical, like that has any sort of real world use, like we're gonna start throwing stuff at you, right? Don't you dare. And that's sometimes how it is. So I mean, there's a couple programs out there that are pretty solid from a PhD perspective, but there's not that many of them out there.
Yeah. I just wanted to grab a couple of things in the chat about the research project. So we started building that about 10 or so years ago, and mostly it's folks coming to us. I mean, we're not a consulting company that's out sort of knocking on doors. We certainly we do promote the work we do, but even that's pretty light. So most of it is they come to us. However, I would point out that one of the beautiful things that's happened since Nicci's taken over as our research director is she's really launched some work to get us more into the grant space. And we're keeping our fingers crossed that we might see something come out of that, through the lab in the next year or so. So mostly
Yeah.
coming to us, but doesn't mean we
And so,
can't.
yeah, and sorry to interrupt, but I think Brandon, I think you had 3 questions. I think we answered the first 2, but I think we dropped the ball on the third one. Do you remember the third one?
No, I actually I think you got them all. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, there was, yeah, actually I wrote it down and then I got sidetracked. So, it's like where would you, where are the jobs, so to speak? And, you mentioned government, nonprofit, private sector, and I would say yes, 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 and foundations, maybe another big one. And if you count NGOs as close to government or separate, there's an overwhelming trend that I've seen in the last, since in my career towards a lot more internal positions than there used to be. So it used to be is all consultants, right? Now there's still consultants out there, no doubt, but there's been a lot more internal, and those take a little bit more work to find, but that's part of what we do here, right? We find out who is doing some interesting internal work, whether they're in, again, it is a mix across the public, private, and again, the foundation philanthropic sector has been a nice recent entry in the last 5 or so years. So it's across
Yeah.
the spectrum, and then, hopefully part of what you find here in the program is what speaks to me, right? Where do I want to go?
Yeah. You do also get a healthy dose of folks that are like junior to senior executives, and they kind of come in and they'll end up doing very specific, very complex projects. And as the instructor, they're like, "Hey, you need to sign an NDA for this project I'm working on for work, right?" And you're like, "Okay, fine." And then they kind of do all the work, and then they just sort of just go off into their organizational ether. And occasionally you see them being promoted on LinkedIn or something, but they never have any futures, foresight, none of that language ever associated with their name or title. They're like, senior vice president of blah, 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 right? So you also get a healthy dose of that as well.
Okay, we probably got time for a couple more. If anyone else has a question? Cesar.
Hi guys, thank you. This is great. Like more or less, like how far in should we start thinking if it's an internship or a project or a thesis, like just to plan a little bit.
Yeah, it's certainly up to you. My view would be about halfway. Go through the first half. Again, like just try not to be, and then yeah, that about halfway point start to say, all right. So there is some, like, how many classes per semester, and you can kind of calculate what we have found, and you have 5 years. Other than that, there's no real timing pressure. We just find most people seem to be about 2.5 years these days. And most people are part-time. We have a few full-timers, but vast majority are part-time. So somewhere around the halfway point, you might start. And the only reason we say to wait is because you don't want to like commit too early, then find out that you have a whole nother area of interest that you did. Systems thinking. It's like, oh my God, like, my life has just changed, and that kind of stuff does happen, right? You just find that I found my path. Yeah. But we're planners, right? That's why we're here. So we understand that impulse. It's a good one. You should have it, right? Oh, we don't like the plan. It's like, well, dang.
I have a question. So a lot of people who graduate from this program, or something you were saying earlier, Adam, about how some executives might come in and they might not have anything about foresight in their title at all. And I understand like the type of places where people get jobs after the program, but what are like the job titles? Are they like strategy? Is that like, just so I can kind of wrap my head around the future a little bit?
I guess I'll go first, but I think we might all have something to say about that. I think so. Certainly, I would say that the major, not no actual futurists as a job title, 10 years ago were very rare. Now it's not. I mean, there are job titles with futurists. Now, one of the things that's a little tricky, sometimes from our point of view, they're not very futurist. It could be like, a lot of times people just, because it's kind of a voguish term, you see people using it without really knowing what that means. But on the whole, that's a good place to start. If someone says they want, an organizational futurist, that's probably a good place to start. But you see things like, I guess you would say, probably innovation for a while was like a really good hotspot. And like Adam just mentioned, design, certainly strategy, and like almost with all of those, it's like this sort of hybrid idea, right? So somebody says, we're doing we're doing strategy work, but we want a foresight feed to that. We're doing innovation work, we want a foresight feed. So a lot of times the positions are kind of hybrid, and like Adam said, they may not actually have foresight in the title, but then you read the job description, like, oh my God, that's perfect. And so, if you're patient and you're willing to kind of mine LinkedIn, there is, you can kind of find a lot of those kind of hybrid jobs, or we know a lot of people, so that also is a way that we get to them. But so probably a lot more of them are that kind of that hybrid nature, and that just it takes that little extra effort to find them, I guess.
Yeah, just real quickly, so like certain language like futures, the word that's tends to be maybe a little bit more academic, right? In some of its spaces. So you'll see design futurists and stuff like that, maybe in corporate organizational spaces, but futures versus foresight's a little bit more connected with strategy, and you'll see it in kind of more organizational spaces. Sometimes a number of organizations will have like small teams residing even in marketing. And so it'll be like the global insights team or
Yes.
terms like that.
Mhm.
I can tell you just personally, when I was in organizational context for quite a while, they sort of resisted having good sounding titles because the idea was that you go through a cycle and then HR would come in like a black cloak and sneak up behind you, and anyone that had like a really nice sounding title would end up getting axed because anyone with a great title isn't really relevant to the operations and the organization. So for a long time, my title was stuff like continuous improvement and compliance director of, and it would
Oof.
just be around like, oh, it's process improvement and it's compliance, but it was really around foresight, innovation, and risk mitigation. But that sounds too exciting, so like we don't want that. And so there's this interesting space where sometimes, we'll go through some of that in intro and then also pro seminar, just even finding some of these places and some of the language. Because if you're just like, okay, I'm ready to be senior manager of strategic foresight after finishing this, so just finding that particular role,
Yeah.
they're out there, but there's not necessarily like a ton of them. But there's all of these other roles and titles and names.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're at a little over 6:30. We try to be punctual, save your time, but appreciate you coming along. So obviously, like I said, we'll do a little bit of intro with a little orientation with each class, but it's kind of good to set the table. And I'll send around these slides in case there's any gems that you want to hold on to. And then I guess we'll see you in roughly next week, right?
Is
Okay,
that when class starts? I know I sound ridiculous right now, but is that when class starts?
next week, yeah. Oh, I
Great.
know.
I
I
didn't
just I just
get the
approved
memo.
you. You just got approved today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you just got to accept the letter, and we'll get you going. So there's probably
Okay.
been a few people who are gonna be right down to the wire.
My mom was like, when do you start? And I was like, I have no idea.
Yeah,
That's great. See you all next week. I'll stop talking now.
yeah. All right. Well, welcome. See, thanks for being patient. All right. We'll see you next week. Thanks a lot. Look forward
Good.
to seeing you.
Nice to meet you all. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.